Hello everyone, welcome back. We are about to discuss chapters 11 and 12. That would be the chapters on long-term assets and current liabilities. For long-term assets, what I'd like to ask you to do is go to sub-chapter or section 11.3. Explain and apply depreciation methods. This is the primary quantitative calculation in the chapter. What is depreciation? Depreciation is a process by which fixed assets, that is property, plant, and equipment, loses or decreases in value over time. If you buy a piece of equipment for $1,000 today and it's expected to last 3 years, it's going to be worth $1,000 today and zero 3 years from now, as you use it up, so to speak, or wear it down. Now that creates an interesting question. Okay, so today it's worth 1,000. 3 years from now it's worth 0. What is it worth 1 year from now? Or 2 years from now? And how do you go about reducing the value of the asset and therefore reducing the value of the firm by recognizing an expense? Well, that's what the chapter is all about. If you go to 11.3, or at least that's what the sub-chapter is all about, right below the heading for 11.3, 2 chapters down, there is yet another section called Your Turn. And it gives us a number of different depreciation methods. First, we have the straight line method. What that means is the asset loses pretty much the same amount of value with every passing day or week or month or year. So in my example, if you buy an asset for $1,000 and it's expected to last 3 years, it will lose precisely $333.33 in value each year. That also means that there will be $333.33 of expense each year. And that is what the textbook in this Your Turn section is trying to show you. Under the straight line solution in both 2019 and 2020, or as they say, in both years, the depreciation of this particular asset is $1,800 a year. The asset is losing under straight line the same amount of value in each passing period, in this case 1 year. Then, as you see in this Your Turn section, we have a different method called the units of production method. What's that all about? Well, it's pretty straightforward conceptually. What it means is, or what the method implies is, if you're going to use the equipment twice as much in 1 year as another, then it should lose twice as much value in the year that you're going to use it twice as often. So let me give you a different example. Let's say that you buy a hole puncher to punch holes in paper. And let's say you spend $100 for the hole puncher. And let's say it's a very, very expensive hole puncher and it's very fragile, and you know you're only going to be able to use it 100 times before it breaks? Well, if you buy an asset for $100, and if you're only going to be able to use it 100 times until it breaks, then every time you punch a hole, that hole puncher will lose $1 in value. Because if you punch it 100 times, it will not be worth anything anymore. And in a period when you punch, let's say, 20 holes, you'll lose twice as much value as in a period when you're only punching 10 holes. In the textbook example, in the first year, you are using this piece of equipment 20,000 times. In the second year, you're using it 30,000 times. That's 50% more often. And therefore, in the second year, you are recognizing 50% more expense, $2,700 worth of expense, as opposed to $1,800. Then you have a very strange method called the double declining balance method. There is a calculation that you must use to compute depreciation, which again, keep in mind, is the loss in value of the asset in year 1 and year 2. But the depreciation method doesn't seem to rely upon the amount of time that you are using the asset or the same amount of depreciation each year. In fact, there's this funny little formula that seems designed to yield the result that your first year's depreciation is going to be a lot more than your second year's depreciation. That's the case in this example, in the textbook. Your first year depreciation is $4,000. Your second year depreciation is only $2,400. You have much more depreciation in the first year than the second. That's actually the whole point of the method. And you might be wondering, why create a depreciation method that arbitrarily is designed to have much more of your loss of value in year 1? Well, the reason for that is there are simply certain types of assets that lose a lot of value in their very first year of use. The most famous type of asset is a new automobile, new cars. You may or may not be aware of this, but if you go to a new car dealer and buy a car for, let's say, $40,000, if you drive it off the lot, it's yours. You own it. Let's say you barely drive it at all. So a couple months later, it's still pretty much new. And then you try to sell it. You will find that what you can get for the car is much, much less than the $40,000 you paid for it. In other words, when you buy a new car, the saying is it loses an awful lot of value the moment you drive it home for the first time. Why is that? Well, I guess your guess is as good as mine. But the general explanation is there's just something about a car being new that people particularly appreciate. If you buy a new car, you will be able to enjoy its full value. However, the moment it is no longer new, even if it's only moments old, it's just worth an awful lot less. And as you can see here, we reflect that in the depreciation method by creating a method, the double declining balance method, that has a lot more depreciation in the first year than in later years. Now that's chapter 11. Chapter 12 covers current liabilities in detail. Much of chapter 12 is not particularly new. However, I would like to take you to a particular table in chapter 12 and walk you through the concept a bit. It is chapter 12, table 12.2. Let's take a look at that. Table 12.2 involves a type of liability called contingent liability. Basically, it means that you may or may not owe a lot of money. Well, how can you know whether or not you owe money? Well, sometimes you have a contract or an agreement, and you know you must pay what you owe. That's usually how it works. But sometimes, for instance, somebody is suing you, and you simply don't know whether or not you will win or lose the lawsuit. And until you learn whether you've won or lost it, you don't know if you will have to pay or not. In other words, we say that your actual liability, the requirement that you pay, is contingent upon or depends upon the outcome of the lawsuit. Well then, is it a liability or not? Do you record it as a transaction or not? As you can see in table 12.2, we have a number of brief rules. If it is probable that you will lose the lawsuit, and you can estimate the amount you will have to pay, then the liability is probable and estimable, and you do need to record it. If the lawsuit or the liability is not estimable, in other words, if you cannot estimate how much you will need to pay, or if you believe that it is only reasonably possible but not probable that you will have to pay, or if it is very unlikely that you will lose the lawsuit and have to pay. In other words, if payment is remote, then you do not have to record the liability. However, if it is probable that you will have to pay, even if you cannot estimate the amount, or if it is reasonably possible, although you do not have to journalize or record the liability, it is nevertheless true that you will need to disclose the fact that you are facing a lawsuit in the footnotes to the financial statements. Those are contingent liabilities. They are some of the more unusual types of liabilities that you will face, and that's why we spent a few minutes talking about it in this video. Thank you very much for your time, and I look forward to seeing you right back here during the next module, when we will discuss long-term liabilities and corporation accounting.